The Christmas season. The time for family, the time for fun, the time for...
The situation is only getting worse.
We have broken the all-time record for emergency department closures.
2023 has shattered records.
The area burn in the country this year is quite literally off the charts.
Crazy bully offers constantly happening because everybody's fighting for the few affordable houses that still exist.
Jesus Christ. Today we're looking at the Level 2 DCC Lankhmar adventure Unholy Nights In Lankhmar by Michael Curtis. It is a murder investigation story with a Christmas horror twist. Before I get into spoilers, if you just want to know if I recommend this module, as a rule of thumb, if there's a DCC adventure written by Michael Curtis, it has my recommendation. I genuinely think that Michael Curtis is my favorite DCC adventure author, and I've played many of his adventures, so until I play one that I don't like, if I do one by Michael Curtis, there's a very good chance that I recommend it. So for today's adventure, it gets my greasy burger seal of approval. However, if you are a newer game master or new to DCC or this side of the hobby, I don't actually recommend this as your first time running DCC. It mixes urban traversal, investigation, and some dungeon crawling in it, so there's quite a lot going on. It is really well laid out, and it is done in a way that if you're new to investigation games, it is easier for you to get into, but if it's your first time, I could see a lot of people getting overwhelmed by this adventure. But don't let this discourage you if you really want to run this. I just want to give out the warning because this is one of the more advanced DCC adventures I think I've run. However, with that said, Curtis has written many helpful notes throughout the adventure that if you're new to investigation games, this actually isn't the worst place to start if you already have your toes dipped into DCC and you're just looking for something a little bit different than dungeon crawling. I think this actually is a really good place to start if you haven't really played, COC or Vaesen or any kind of, horror investigation game before. I think this is actually a really good place to start. Especially if you still want to stay in the realm of DCC, you could do a lot worse than this. So with that, this is your spoiler warning. If you don't want your GM to hit you with a bundle of sticks and shove you into a sack, turn off the video now. This is a fairly dense adventure, so I'm going to try and keep this pretty broad and to the point so that we're not here all day. I've run this 3 times now, and unless you're running in like a 6-hour time slot, I don't recommend running this in a one-shot. I was only able to finish it in a one-shot by being proactive with some information and cutting out a decent amount of content. If you're new to the channel, I don't like calling things reviews unless I've played them myself, so I tend to run a lot of things in smaller time frames than I would recommend playing them in because I have a bit more of a deadline for myself for making these videos. I think you should let this adventure breathe. I would set aside 2 sessions for it, maybe even 3, if you're weaving a lot more into the investigation and if your players and you are enjoying the roleplay. Especially if you're running this as part of a bigger campaign, I could really see you peppering in complications that make it take longer, like a rival gang they've run into before, or maybe like a contemptuous official, or whatever you might want to do to make your world feel a little bit more vibrant and lived in, where there might be stories going on that don't have to do with whatever the players are doing themselves. The premise of this adventure is that about 2 weeks ago, Lankhmar was dunked into this endless night, or at least seemingly so, where these dark clouds have come over all across Lankhmar and have not left yet, but that doesn't mean people don't need to still make money in Lankhmar. Rent still needs to be paid, and booze still needs to be drunk. So the game starts with the party going to meet Dhruv the Puzzler, a previous contact that they've given a map to that might lead to some treasure, or some kind of old scroll or that kind of thing that might lead to more adventures, and they're going over there now to find out what's been decoded on it. But when they get there, they find that Dhruv the Puzzler has been gruesomely murdered. They can see that his office was ransacked, he was dragged up onto the stairs, and crazily a tree has grown from behind his back through his chest cavity, all his internal organs on it like these macabre decorations, as the book says. They find out from the neighbor that he was dragged away by some weird wraith creatures with like these aurora borealis lights coming out of their hoods. So it's all very weird and strange. So the party will go off to find out who killed Dhruv the Puzzler, but more importantly, who took their map. The overall premise is pretty classic, but the overall flavor and the execution is what makes it so special. Essentially, a Mingal sorcerer is trying to bring back an old Mingal warlord for all the evil sorceress reasons why you might want to bring back a Kmart Genghis Khan. They're doing this by doing 12 ritual sacrifices using special bad vibes dirt and weird trees. Oh, and a heads up, the Mingle Warlord and Mingle Sorcerer of the same name have a name that sounds very close to the word cock, so be aware of the drastic tone change when you rasp out cock to your friends. The main reason why I find this adventure so compelling is the same reason why I would recommend it to people new to investigation games, and that is because it does the investigation game part right. In investigation games, players should always have a lead, and this adventure is very good about always giving them one, and if they don't have one, how to get one pretty quickly without too much frustration. Firstly, it works really well as part of a campaign or a standalone game. If you're doing it as part of a campaign, it's not hard at all to have that undecipherable map end up somewhere in a previous adventure, and then you can also maybe even flesh out Druve by handing it off to him, have him go on a mission or talk to him and either make him like a nice guy or make him somebody interesting or in some way maybe make him attached to the party in some way. You don't have to, but just having a little bit of that extra little bit fleshed out character might make them a little bit more attached to him, especially when he dies, and that could be a really fun sort of 1-2 punch by both killing him and then also stealing their shit, because a slighted player is one of the most dangerous and determined people on the planet, and they will get their shit back. As for smaller games, it kicks off with a bang because the players end up at the first crime scene as the first scene of the game. Also, because they are in a city, if this is part of a bigger campaign, there are a lot of people in this adventure that you can go talk to for the different clues and that sort of thing, but don't be afraid to replace those people with people that you've already put into your game, or these people you might want to put them into your game earlier, just like Druve, where there's a bit more of an attachment and a bit more stuff going on in the city. For example, that there's Kala Green Tresses in this story, who is, a plant connoisseur. You could replace her with like a wizard or some sort of druid type, or somebody who would, know about plants that the players might have known before. You can use this as an opportunity to bring in new characters to flesh out the world more, or flesh out characters that are already established. If for whatever reasons players fail luck checks or don't notice things, which by the way, as a general rule for investigation games, crucial clues should be behind questions, not checks, then they can always go back to like taverns or, places of ill repute to find rumors. So if they ever for some reason don't have a lead, which they should at most times, but if they don't, there's always the fail switch of like, hey, go ask around, go talk to people, and that will get them back on their way to a different clue that might get them back on the path to finding out what the hell is going on. Secondary clues that might create more leads can be behind checks, but don't ever be afraid to give too much information to the players. Trust me, giving players too much information in an investigation game instead of not enough is always better. Nothing disengages players more than wheel spinning and hitting their head against a wall and not knowing what to do next. So even if they are breezing through things or things are going too fast, it's better than the alternative. And also, if you want to lengthen things out, you can always put in muggers or, throw in some random complications or random encounters or, maybe some RP or something like that. You can always do stuff to make it go longer if that is your concern. In any case, from the first crime scene, the player should have 2 to 3 leads. From trying to find somebody who knows more about the weird dirt and trees, remembering hearing about another murder like this yesterday, and they may even notice a strange red figure on the rooftops. So they have a few leads they can follow up on, but let's get Santa out of the way because he's a complete red herring and also technically not even Santa. He's this trans-dimensional traveler who gathers cool specimens, and he has found that a lot of worlds have some version of Santa Claus, so he uses that as a disguise since people won't believe it if anybody sees him. That's right, this Santa doesn't give you coal, he just gaslights your ass. Anyway, he still provides leads even though he's a red herring, but I come out entirely when I ran this as a one-shot because he will take you in a different direction. I absolutely recommend keeping him in though. Like I said, I would run this in a 2 or 3 shot. He is so fun. Every time I've had him in the games, the players have loved it. And I think he's just a really fun take on Santa because I could see it being kind of hacky or gimmicky, which I guess it is a little bit, but I do still think he's done really well and he fits with the lore of Nehwon, so it's even funner. The other leads will take them to a colorful cast of characters such as DCC's most accurate depiction of a cop who rather pin it on the party than actually do any work himself, as well as this nefarious merchant who deals in creepy and kind of black market things, as well as a few other fun characters who are both fun to roleplay and interact with. All these leads will point them to a building on Festival Street where the final ritual killing is happening. This climax is a really fun one because a blizzard begins just as they are getting closer to the building, creating higher tension, and they have to fight through these weird ice gnome creatures dressed in old festival clothing from the building they are in, making them look like fucked up little elf freaks along with some of those wraiths from earlier. And basically you have this big climactic fight during the ritual, so you're trying to stop them before the ritual completes, and it's just a really fun time, as most of these kinds of endings tend to be, where, you have that one extra goal you gotta deal with. Of course, when you have a wizard in a one-shot, they tend to make pretty short work of it, but it was fun nonetheless. Especially since last time I played during the climax, the wizard had a mercurial magic spell that essentially created a 2-year-long winter in Lankhmar. So even though they ended up saving the day, stopping the ritual odd stuff, and the dark clouds parted and, the sun shone down, they still had 2 more years of winter even after that. And that just made their victory infinitely funnier. And that is Unholy Nights in Lankhmar. If it isn't clear, I completely recommend it. It is a really, really fun, spooky game to play around Christmas time. I do have some gripes with the layout, and as well as some of the box text, or I guess like the descriptive text, can be a little bit long and overly wordy, but overall, it's not really anything that's like game breaking, and I do think with the DCC layout, it does do the best job it can by putting clues in bullet point form, so it's not too hard to find the stuff you need to find. If you are going to run this, I do recommend taking some notes in case you are a little bit worried about, knowing all the information every character has. It is pretty well laid out on their pages, but just in case, it might not be the worst thing to get in your brain by just writing out what they know. Huge thank you to my patrons as always. I am currently saving up the money that you guys are giving me for a new light, so I can have a proper light system here when I'm filming, so I can really take advantage of my camera. But thank you guys so much for everything you guys do. I really, really appreciate it. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a good one, and stay safe out there.